Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, uh, presidential candidate, former UN ambassador, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley has stepped in the middle of it and did so quite forcefully when she attempted to come up with a solution to misinformation on the internet. Her solution? Oh, it's simple. Let's de-anonymize it. Let's make it so people, if you say something, everybody's gonna know who it is. So the very people who attempt to intimidate, attempt to cancel, who've made it so it doesn't make sense to say stuff if you're that might be conservative, because guess what? You're gonna get canceled. Apparently, Nikki Haley's unaware of the cancel culture. Apparently, she's not aware of debanking. She's not aware of deplatforming. She's not aware of people actually having their businesses shuttered because of free speech, not threats of violence. But here's Nikki Haley. Here's what she said. You got to pay attention. You got to hear this because, quite honestly, being this unaware and this uninformed about what's happening with the U.S. government's directing actual censorship activity against U.S. citizens for exercising speech on elections and, COVID and even things like whether, different things like whether or not Donald Trump's president or not, or should have been president. Can't have those thoughts, can't have that speech. And so here we go. Here's Nikki Haley. Here's her answer.
Speech. We never want that to go away. But the difference is when you are pushing violence, when you're pushing genocide. I mean, that's what this is. When you support Hamas and exist.
She's exactly right there. You do not have a right to incite violence. You do not have a right to say things that are, that are encouraging others to kill other people. Okay. That is, you have there are rules. You're not allowed to go into a theater and shout fire. But here she continues.
That you support that the Jewish people shouldn't exist. And so what I have said is, if that KKK doing that, every college president would be up at arms. What we need to remind Americans is anti-Semitism is no different than racism. They are both evil. And
she is right. She's doing fine so far, but she continues talking.
Don't want to have that always bubbling underneath the surface. But now we're seeing this massive exaggeration of it, but no one's talking about why. The truth is, if you look at dramatic sides of social media, China, Iran, and North Korea, it is what counts. Social media companies, they have to show America their algorithms. Let us see why they're pushing what they're pushing. The second thing is every person on social media should be verified by their name. That's, first of all, it's a national security threat. When you get rid of the Russian bots, the Iranian bots, and the Chinese bots.
Well, first of all, you can get rid of the Russian, Iranian, Chinese, North Korean bots without doing that. Okay, that's the truth. You can get rid of them without doing that. So it's kind of a false narrative. Secondly, the fact of the matter is, and here's the real challenge. You know what? When the Federalist papers were done, they're the papers that an argument done by, and there's the anti-Federalist papers. The arguments about what our Constitution should look like were written anonymously by people who later on we figured out who, scholars figured out who they were, but they were written anonymously. They're written anonymously because of a couple of factors. Number one, there was a need for anonymity in a kind of where everything was kind of up in the air and passions run high. Secondly, arguments carry or don't carry. If I'm sitting there and I write something, if Alexander Hamilton wrote something, people said, I don't like Alexander Hamilton, so I'm not going to vote for, I'm not going to like what he wrote. I'm not going to read what he wrote. But if you have something that's written by an anonymous, figure, Publius or somebody, then you sit there and say, hey, this Publius guy's got some decent ideas, and you're no longer mixing it with the personalities. It's actually a battle of ideas. That was actually the concept, and that's what happened. So you had a battle of ideas. That was how our country got founded, was through a battle of ideas posted by anonymous men. That is the truth. And now we didn't have social media, so they were doing it the old-fashioned way, printing presses and broadleafs and the like. But the bottom line is, right now in America, if you go and you have a point of view that runs afoul, let's say you say something like, gee, the Palestinian Association that is engaged in violence should be thrown off of all college campuses. Well, if you were to say that, one of the things that you would get is you would get immediate, being attacked by various Muslim groups, various Palestinian groups. You'd find yourself with your Facebook page would have, you got a strike against you for saying that. You'd find yourself with your YouTube page shuttered. You'd find yourself in a position where perhaps your bank said, we don't want to do business with you anymore, because it would be determined to be something that would be Islamophobic speech. And so as a result, coming up with an answer that actually held the groups accountable and those who are funding those groups accountable would in fact result in repercussions. So what do you want to do about that? Well, if you say, I don't want repercussions, suddenly you say, well, my name isn't, Joe Smith. My name is, Doug from the comic store. Okay. So I'm now Doug from the comic store, and that's my name, and that's who I am. And you sit there and people follow you, and you say, oh, well, look, Doug from the comic store says this. And without your real name and real identity behind it, because quite honestly, most people aren't all that, hep to the idea that, gee, I'm going to lose my ability to bank in this country. I'm going to lose my ability to buy things online. I'm going to lose my website. I might lose capacity to be on various internet entities that I've spent thousands and thousands of hours, and maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars developing a following. So yeah, anonymity provides protection. And what Nikki Haley, apparently completely unaware that the US government, the FBI, was targeting Donald Trump supporters, targeting people who were concerned about COVID and concerned about vaccines, and certainly concerned about the health ramifications of vaccines. We're targeting them and urging social media to shutter them. What's more, some of those people lost their jobs as a result. Some of those people lost their capacity to do business as a result. Some of those people basically lost everything as a result. So for Nikki Haley to not understand what she's talking about when she talks about anonymizing it or de-anonymizing it is startling. She's either too stupid, too unaware, or too totalitarian to be able to be president. It's that simple. Lastly, if Nikki Haley, she undoubtedly is aware of a case, a Supreme Court case called Alabama v. NAACP. We've had a similar fight in the courts. Right now, we're having those fights in the court about being able to have, for instance, give money to nonprofit groups where you don't get a tax deduction anonymously. Why is that important? Because when you give money to groups non-anonymously, you end up getting creamed. For instance, there was a guy who was who invented JavaScript, brilliant guy. He was the head of Mozilla. His name was Brendan Eich. He gave $100 against the gay marriage initiative in California in the 1990s. His side prevailed. He gave $100. His side prevailed. What happened to Brendan Ike? Because in California or everywhere, when you give money, it's transparent, and they say who gave money. Well, activists who didn't like that his position prevailed were going through the list and say, hey, wait a second, this guy's a CEO of a company that we could impact. So they attacked the company. They attacked him. He lost his job. He lost his livelihood because he participated in the political process and in a majority position in the state of California. He lost his ability to do what he did best. A brilliant guy. Now he's still working. He's still doing stuff. I don't know what he's up to, but the fact of the matter is that was the danger of giving a political contribution, a small political contribution to a majority position in the state of California. That was the consequence. So you really want these crazies going across and basically searching the internet for anybody who ever had a statement on anything, and then targeting the company they work for and say, oh, this person, we're going to boycott you unless you deal with this hate speech. Well, that's what they've been doing. Nikki Haley, wake up. That's the reality we're in. That's you apparently don't get it. And back to Alabama v. NAACP, Supreme Court held in the 1950s that state of Alabama was trying to get the membership and contribution list for the NAACP of Alabama. Why? They wanted to go after the individuals who are giving money to the NAACP in Alabama, and undercut the ability of NAACP in Alabama to operate in terms of trying to pass civil rights for blacks in Alabama and nationwide. So they went after the membership list. They went after the contributor list. And the NAACP said, we're not giving it to you. Went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, NAACP doesn't have to give it to them. Why? Because people have a right to participate in the political process anonymously. That this was a freedom of speech issue, and that it was to promote freedom of speech. People have to be able to allow their voice to be heard, even if it's behind a pseudonym or not reported for them. And NAACP of Alabama was taking the place as their voice, who they were supporting, and hence the anonymity had to be guaranteed. That's what the Supreme Court decided in the 1950s. This is settled law. Now it's being challenged right now, and we'll get the Supreme Court dealing with it again in the next session. But it's settled law, and Nikki Haley wants to blow it all apart. And it's hard to believe that somebody who has her background is ignorant of basic reasons why. And taking away the anonymity, the capacity to be anonymous on the internet is important. Now recognize I'm doing this as Rick Manning, president of Americans for Limited Government. And Americans for Limited Government has 512,000, 513,000 followers on Facebook. We've got about 11,000 on YouTube. So if there's a risk involved in doing this, being direct about this and the reasons why. But let's be honest. How can a person who's putting herself up to be president of the United States, when we have a whole committee in the House of Representatives dedicated to stopping the weaponization of government? We've had the Russia collusion hoax. We've had everything that's gone on in the past 8 years that have been designed to shutter free speech, where the government has been actively involved in shuttering free speech. Sit there and say, well, free speech is important, but we don't want to have, we actually want to make it so people can be shut down, have their ability to make a living shuttered, be fired because they're exercising a right on political issues. This is absurd. She's right. If you sit there and you say, if you go into a crowded building, a crowded theater, and you yell fire, and there is no fire, that is a prosecutable offense now. If you go and you attack people on a college campus, that is a prosecutable offense right now. But if you sit there and you say, gee, the government says, oh, we don't like your speech, not doing any real harm, but we don't like your speech. This is what the government narrative is. And consequently, we're going to take you down. And, oh, by the way, we're going to have activists, the mob activists, many of whom are bots themselves, going after you and attacking your employer because you made a mistake on a LinkedIn profile. You're going to do that? Well, I'm sorry. If you believe that's a good idea, you have no business being in the Oval Office. This Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government. I look forward to seeing what you have to say. Let's see here. I'm going to just go to Marty Woljak. She's a big talker. No vote for me. I like Tim Scott for backup, but he's out now. Trump's the only one left. Oh, Mary, I'm sorry. Well, Mary, I'd say, yeah, I was pretty disappointed, but and I get it. We're going to have this election. The primary election is going to come down in South Carolina. Nikki Haley is former governor of South Carolina. She's going to have there's going to be some votes. She's going to have votes in South Carolina. It's going to be this nomination is going to come down to South Carolina, and she is the establishment candidate. She is the globalist candidate. She is the candidate who Jamie Dimon from one of the big banking Wall Street executives, Jamie Dimon, went off and is looking to endorse as the alternative to Donald Trump. So yeah, she's getting the big push right now. And just understand, off the top of her head, unprepared, she came up with this answer. Now she walks it back, and she'll walk it back later on, but there's no excuse for this answer. Let me just go. I'm going to show you what the question was, and then you see the answer is again, and then I'm going to sign off.
I think there's so much to say about the anti-Semitism that we're seeing around the world right now. In every other war that happens not on American soil, you don't see an uprising of hateful, violent, incendiary voices against the perpetrators of the war. An excuse and a catalyst for so many people to show their true hate, and there are no consequences for that. As young as pre-K, teachers indoctrinating students and parents on this hate. We're seeing it in offices, and it's private school kids in New York City are drawing swastikas on buildings. It's everywhere. And I think that my question, which is speech, we all know you can't go into an airport and shout bomb. And yet right now you can chant on college campuses to kill all the Jews, or we have a poster that says keep our streets clean, which is exactly not the group.
This questioner gives really what the question a lot of people are questioning and are wondering. I want you to understand that the right answer was, right now it's illegal to shout bomb in the middle of an airport. It's illegal to urge people to kill the Jews. That is illegal. That is speech that is prohibited. That is under free speech. That is the limitation of free speech. You are not allowed to do that. So what are you looking at in this particular instance? What are you looking at? You're looking at a question, an honest question with an easy answer. This is abhorrent speech. It should not be allowed. Students who are attacking Jews should be expelled. Students who are chanting to kill the Jews should in fact be at the very least reprimanded, if not suspended and expelled. Those are answers which are legitimate answers. those are, and the fact is, if you discover that the people who are doing it are not, are on student visas, you expel them, their student visa is no longer around, and you're able to get rid of it. You're able to move them offshore. And there is nothing wrong with having a debate. Okay. There is a debate, and personally, I'm 100% on the side of Israel. But there is a debate that can be had about a two-state solution. There's a debate as to whether or not, you can have a real debate, an intellectual discussion that causes people to actually become more knowledgeable about circumstances. But what you can't do is say, we want to kill all the Jews. We want to go from the saying from the river to the sea, which is extermination of all the Jews in the Holy Land. That's what that statement means. When you do that, you have, there's a reasonable concern, and that is a reasonable, and it's a discrediting of your other positions. You want to talk about Middle East policy and what the United States position in the Middle East should be, go for it. That's a legit question. That's a legit argument. Let's have the fight. Because the side that I support, which is strongly supporting Israel, strongly acknowledging their right to exist, is both historically and morally the right answer on all respects. So I'll have that fight. But what I don't need is somebody going in and saying, "Oh, we're gonna mess around with names, and we're gonna have to create registries, and we're gonna do all that kind of stuff." Answering this problem with registries is the wrong answer. And if you thought it was the right answer, you need to rethink, Nikki. So that was the question that she did. And once again, I'll give you Nikki Haley's answer, and then we'll be out.
Of people or incites violence against them.
I mean, we're blessed because we have free speech. We're pushing violence. When you're pushing genocide, I mean, that's what this is. When you support Hamas, you're basically saying that you support that Israel shouldn't exist, that you support that the Jewish people shouldn't exist. And so what I've said is, if you look on these college campuses and you see what's happening, if that up at arms, we need to remind Americans is anti-Semitism is no different. But let's go to the core of this. Why is it was anti-Semitic? We're seeing this massive exaggeration of it, but no one's talking about why. The truth is, if you look at social media, the misinformation and the dramatic sides of social media are instigating this. Why? Because it's being pushed by Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. It is why when I get into office, the first thing we have to do, social media accounts, see why they're pushing what they're pushing. The second, by their name, that's, first of all, it's a national security threat. When you do the Russian bots, the Iranian bot, to get some civility, when people know their name is next to what they say,
accountability,
and they know their pastor and their family member is going to see it, it's going to help our kids, and it's going to
look at the anti-Semitism hearing that's going on. Let's watch this.